attorneys. Now, one of his lawyers, John Lauro, spoke with NPR about this yesterday. Let's take a listen.
He got advice from counsel, very, very wise and learned counsel on a variety of constitutional and legal issues. So it's a very straightforward defense that he had every right to advocate for a position that he believed in and his supporters believed in. What we will argue to the jury and will win is that President Trump was arguing for the truth to come out in that election cycle rather than the truth to be denied.
Now, Kate, it's unclear if this type of defense would hold up in the court of law. But if you do look at that 45-page indictment that special counsel Jack Smith and his team filed on Tuesday, they point out that their evidence shows that the former president did know that he lost the election. He was told by many officials around him, including those in his own government. They also argue that he did not have the right, prosecutors say, to engage in a conspiracy to defraud the United States, nor to obstruct the January 6th proceedings. Kate?
Elena Train, thank you so much, Elena. We'll speak to you soon. Sorry.
Oh, no, thank you. She did a great job. With us now, senior legal analyst and former federal prosecutor Jennifer Rogers and constitutional lawyer Michael Waldman, president of the Brennan Center for Justice. Elena, who did a great job, and we do thank her once again, was laying out this defense that we're going to hear from the Trump team, right? That it was a free speech issue, that he really believed that he didn't lose. Well, former Attorney General Bill Barr was asked about that very thing last night. Let's listen to what he said.
Do you think he knew that he lost the election?
Do I personally believe that? Yeah, at first I wasn't sure, but I have come to believe that he knew well that he had lost the election. And now, what I think is important is the government has assumed the burden of proving that. The government, in their indictment, takes the position that he had actual knowledge that he had lost the election and the election wasn't stolen through fraud. And they're going to have to prove that beyond a reasonable doubt.
How do you, Michael, prove that beyond a reasonable doubt?
Well, what the indictment does in great detail is show that all the people who were charged by Donald Trump with telling him what had happened, whether it was people from his campaign, people from the Justice Department, people from the Department of Homeland Security, all said, no, sorry, you lost. It's a question of whether this is really a legal defense or a public opinion defense. When you think about this kind of thing in a criminal context, I may believe the money in a bank is mine, but that doesn't mean I can go in and rob the bank. There are laws, and you're not allowed to break the laws, and those were laws that certainly, allegedly, were broken.
It's interesting, though, the way that Bill Barr even answered that. He said, at first I wasn't sure.
Right.
For a jury, that could be a doubt and or reasonable doubt, yes?
This is the kind of thing that's going to play out in this trial. This is the most important criminal trial in many ways in American history. And the issues are not just everyday law, but really grand and vital issues of our democracy. And was our Constitution attempted to be overthrown? A lot of it will turn on these legal specifications, but a lot of it will turn on something we all saw as citizens at the time.
On the most basic level, Jennifer, why is the fact whether or not Donald Trump acknowledged that he had lost the election, why is it so key?
Well, because you have to prove intent, right? For virtually any criminal charge that we have in our system, you have to prove intent. So if he really was pursuing what he believed to be true with all of these efforts, right? He's the rightful president. He believes it, and he's pursuing ways to stay in office, then you wouldn't have the criminal intent.
How hard do you think this is in terms of the bar that the prosecution needs to meet now?
It's so interesting because it's almost like he's such a good fraudster, it's harder to prove it against him, right? Because he never breaks character, right? So most of the time you have fraudsters who acknowledge to their co-conspirators and other people that they know what they're doing is wrong, and they're just trying to fool their victims. Here, in some ways, he's trying to fool everybody, right? Even the people close to him, they're kind of pretending that he's the rightful president. So it makes it a little harder, but as Michael said, they've gathered a lot of evidence, and they spell it out in the indictment, making very clear he had a right to contest the results in lawful ways. He had a right to file 60-plus lawsuits, as he did.
As he did.
But he lost. And his people kept telling him, you lost, you lost. His own election people, the state election people, you lost, it's over, it's over. And he still proceeds to try to set up, fake electors and all the other unlawful steps he took. That's where it crosses the line.
So in the indictment itself, a lot of the information is not new. One of the things that was new were some of the details surrounding former Vice President Mike Pence, who kept contemporaneous notes. Some details in there we just hadn't known before. So in addition to the new details about Mike Pence, it's possible we saw a new Mike Pence yesterday as well when he was asked about this case. I want to play a little bit about what he said about how he was being pushed to overturn the election.
Let's be clear on this point. It wasn't just that they asked for a pause. The president specifically asked me, and his gaggle of crackpot lawyers asked me to literally reject votes.
That felt different to me than what Mike Pence has written or said in interviews. And if that's the Mike Pence...
It was different than what he said.
Thank you. If that is the Mike Pence we see on the witness stand, as Kate says, how much of a difference does that make?
If he talks like that on the witness stand, he's a heck of a witness. One of the new facts in the indictment is that at one point when he refused to reject the electoral votes, Trump said to Pence, "You're just too honest." And that is a pretty powerful bit of evidence of corrupt intent. Yeah.
操价快感，空间质感，再享已事前的安心感和低月付7999的轻松感。本月入主 Ford Focus， 实在有感。
When you have
Pence, if you remember, he wouldn't cooperate with the January 6th committee. But he clearly cooperated and felt he had no choice but to cooperate with this criminal process. And he may just be saying, this is where I really need to speak up. I have no choice.
Jennifer, just thinking of the fact that Mike Pence, the former vice president, under Donald Trump, he's running against him now in the presidential primary, could be a witness on the witness stand in his trial. It really is just quite an image to be painting here.
Yeah, him and others. I mean, the former White House counsel, maybe the former chief of staff, depending on what Mark Meadows is doing, which is one of the big question marks here. I mean, the witness list will be epic, right? Just like the defendant is epic here, never seen before. But these are the people who have the evidence, because these are the people who were in the room with them as they were plotting to find ways to keep him in power.
I won over by the Kate Bolger argument here. That was a totally different Mike Pence that we saw there in terms of the emotion he was putting into the answer, but also what he actually said there, that Donald Trump and his team of crackpot lawyers were trying to get me to throw out votes. That statement in and of itself, if he puts that in the witness stand, does that statement put Donald Trump in a different kind of legal jeopardy?
Well, it puts him in the kind of legal jeopardy that he's been charged with. I mean, it's great evidence in this case, as is the other evidence that we've collected. I mean, Mike Pence, he hasn't been fully forthright, at least publicly from what we've known. Presumably, he's told investigators what he knows. So, yeah, this is the key evidence. And Mark Meadows as well. I certainly want to hear what he has to say.
The First Amendment defense at large, you're a constitutional lawyer. What are the boundaries of it? What are they playing with here?
Well, the First Amendment, of course, is very powerful. The Supreme Court is very respectful of the First Amendment. It's the kind of thing that gets raised occasionally in criminal cases. Somebody committing securities fraud or something like that says, oh, I was just expressing my opinion. And as a general matter, it is not a very powerful defense if you've been breaking the law. What the indictment did that was important is it said, look, he had the right to say publicly what he believed. He even had the right to lie publicly, but these are actions. And so this is the kind of defense, in part, that may be aimed for appealing the case, appealing a conviction, rather than actually winning in the courtroom.
Michael Waldman, Jennifer Rogers, terrific discussion. Thank you both so much for
you
coming
guys.
in.
Thank you. Coming up for us, 3 indictments, 2 impeachments, 1 former president. Donald Trump's high polling and voter support amongst Republicans, though, still seems unshakable as he now pushes towards the 2024 race. Can anything stop the momentum? And what is the impact of his legal troubles? What does it have on the race?
I thought you were going to get the 5 golden rings there at some point.
You know, it's not, well, there's stand by, John Berman. Plus this, Fox News executives are urging Donald Trump to take part in the first Republican presidential debate later this month. What the sources are saying about whether he will show up and the circumstances around those conversations. Plus, new CNN polling. In just hours, Donald Trump will be arraigned in federal court for his efforts to overturn the 2020 election, just as brand new CNN polling is out and showing this. that nearly 70% of Republicans polled still believe Donald Trump and still believe that President Biden's White House win was not legitimate.
With us now, CNN political commentator and former South Carolina State Representative Bakari Sellers and Republican strategist and former RNC Communications Director Doug Heye. 69%, gentlemen, still think that Joe Biden did not win the election of Republican voters, Doug. That creates something of a situation in a Republican primary, no?
Well, it does, and it's why you see Republican candidates who are running against Donald Trump, if they don't say that the election is stolen, they at least raise questions. They say, well, you know, if you look at something in Arizona or something in Georgia, there are questions out there when maybe there aren't questions, but they have to speak to that part of the base, or at least they feel that they have to. And that's why I think this upcoming debate's going to be interesting to see how far these candidates go down that line, given where Republican primary voters are right now.
Let's talk about that debate in just a second. But Bakari, nearly 7 in 10 Republicans don't believe Joe Biden's win was legitimate. How much does that raise the political stakes for this case and what we're going to start seeing playing out today?
Well, it raises it exponentially because, in all honesty, Jack Smith has to have more than overwhelming evidence in order to convince the majority or overwhelming majority of Americans. And I don't think that's necessarily his goal. But in the court of public opinion, if you want to have broad bipartisan support, that's what it's going to take. I think what you saw from the president of the United States or former president of the United States was not only this conspiracy, but overt acts, not only the intent, but overt acts to overthrow and obstruct the January 6th certification. And so what we're seeing here is a Republican Party that is so disconnected from reality that Jack Smith has his work cut out for him if one of the goals is to win in the court of public opinion. If that's not a goal, go in, win in the court of law, get a guilty verdict, and let the history books write the story as they may.
Hey, Bakari, what's the risk inside and outside the courtroom if Jack Smith doesn't win this case?
Yeah, I mean, look, when you file these cases, and I think when prosecutors file these cases, many of them file these cases not believing that they will lose these cases. I don't know many prosecutors that go into court saying that, look, we don't have enough evidence. I'm just here because this is what I want to do on a Tuesday morning. So Jack Smith believes he has the evidence to find the president guilty, not only here, but in South Florida. But if he does not, I think what you do is you embolden this president, this sociopath. I think you embolden him. I think you put him on another pedestal. I think that all of the individuals that we're talking about that are so disconnected from reality in these polls will then be able to point at something and say, look, the deep state tried. They could not get our hero. He's still alive. He's still fighting. I think that's the danger. You embolden a sociopath.
Doug, one thing we just played in the last segment, I think we should play it
Let's
again.
do it again.
Okay. We just played, and we're going to play it again. Mike Pence, a different Mike Pence, on the trail yesterday, being asked about this indictment, being asked about what he was asked to do ahead of January 6th. Listen to this.
Let's be clear on this point. It wasn't just that they asked for a pause. The president specifically asked me, and his gaggle of crackpot lawyers asked me to literally reject votes.
And essentially try to overturn an election, he says. What do you make of this, Mike Pence? Doug?
Well, you know, so often when we have a trial, we hear the phrase all-star witness, and I don't think that's ever been or going to be more true than it is with Mike Pence, and for two reasons. One, what he said yesterday, and the fact that he said it to Martha MacCallum on Fox means he was talking to that 69%, but also what Mike Pence was recording at the time when he was taking notes about who said what to him on various days, whether it was January 6th or January 5th, or, you know, pick your day in the run-up to that. It makes what Mike Pence says extremely important in this case because it gets to what did Donald Trump know and what did he believe. And that's where we're going to see the hardest part of this is how do you prove what was in somebody's head? Mike Pence has some firsthand knowledge here that he was recording at the time. It's going to make him very, very important, not just in this trial, but if he qualifies for the debate, and it looks like he's going to be that voice on the stage that takes on Donald Trump in a way that the other Republican candidates have been very fearful of doing so thus far.
First of all, gaggle of crackpot lawyers, not a bad name for a band. if you were starting a band. Secondly, Bakara, you were nodding when Doug was speaking, both when he was talking about the courtroom and also the debate stage. Explain the nodding, the affirmation you just gave to Mr. High there.
Well, actually, I just had this thought in my head of Mike Pence being on the stand and the prosecutor asking him to point out the person he was referring to, and him having this moment and this moment of just